Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1 of Christopher Chambers' new podcast and video show, Chris Chambers Noir. This also connects to his brand new website that features all of his books, and he has written so many amazing books and short stories, and he's been in compilations and Marvel stuff. We're going to get into all of that today. I'm Hope Katz Gibbs, proud producer of this show on Incandescent Radio, Incandescent TV. And we also shout out on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple, of course, and YouTube. So, Chris, welcome to your new show.
Thank you.
All right,
Great to
let's
be
just start.
here.
We're so happy that we're doing this with you. I'm so pleased that we created chrischambersnoir.com. You have written so many amazing books. So let's start by telling the audience a little bit about you, because you have a day job too. So maybe start there and then get into how you got into be a writer.
Well, it's kind of full circle. I'm actually, an attorney, and back in the day of, when Scott Turow and what's the name of the guy who wrote the the firm?
Oh yeah. All those
I
good
mean,
things. Yeah.
the joke was on, and this is going to date me right here on the C drive, so that should tell you how old I am. On the C drive of every lawyer's desk, there was a novel or a book of poetry or something like that because they all wanted to do something else, but they were stuck doing that. But here I am full circle. I'm now general counsel to a big nonprofit that does student housing development, affordable student housing development. But I do a lot of other stuff too. I mean, I was teaching at Georgetown undergrad and law school, but I got young people, whether they're kindergartners or college students, will drive you crazy. So I got out of that. I got out of that racket fast. I'm still a fellow at the International Conflict Resolution Center, although I cut back on that quite a bit because the only thing more aggravating than kids are world leaders. And so I've done a little of that too. I mean, we actually mediated a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which was insane. That was a couple of years ago, and that was during COVID too. So that was you've got a couple of layers of craziness there. Talk about noir and blood. But I'm doing that too. But I'm also a writer. And it's like, when do I sleep? Here, people ask me that question too. But I mean, it's one of these things where I've always wanted to do this since I was a kid. So this feeds a need in me that I've always had, and and the genre itself has fed that need because I've always liked everything from action, adventure, comic books, mystery, crime fiction, cop and robber type stuff. Even when I was young, detectives. But I usually sided with the criminals. So I was always pulled in by the darkness. So the anti-heroes were a little bit more my thing, but so it's always been there. And maybe that's why I became a lawyer, because lawyers really are kind of anti-heroes. If you think about it, they're never entirely good, even if they say they are. So that's how I got kind of pulled into this.
That's awesome. So your first book, Sympathy for the Devil, was published on September 11th, 2001. First of all, tell us about the book, but holy moly, what crazy timing.
Well, that was my first foray into trying to be a writer, and I got very lucky because I was able to secure an agent and work on a manuscript while I was working full time as an attorney, and that was purely by fate God, you know, Shiva, Jesus, all that, they giveth and they taketh away. So I was able to, they giveth because I was able to get an agent and work on a manuscript, in New York agent, all that kind of stuff. And then they taketh away, the September 11th. I was supposed to go and do a book launch. At that point, I was actually not in DC. I was temporarily down in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was scheduled to go to the Borders. You remember Old Borders bookstore at Five World Trade a couple of days after that, and of course Five World Trade didn't exist, after that Tuesday, and it's like the whole world, just tumbled down literally, and it was just Surreal. As a matter of fact, after all of that settled out, um, we had a DC, because even though I was in Charlotte, still based and had friends and family up here. We were going to have a DC launch, and that's when they had the I don't know whether it was ricin or what that stuff
In
was.
the post office, yeah.
The post office. So it was like a double whammy. So I was like sitting around wondering, like, what had I done wrong in life? And that book was, and it was a hardcover thriller for Random House, which, for a debut writer, that was something, and for an African American too, that was a double feather in the cap. That was, unheard of. Because at the time, I mean, all there really was, Walter Mosley had made inroads there, and the only other African American writer that was really making splashes then, um, uh, was, I mean, I guess it was, I guess was Waiting to Exhale and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So, but in our genre, it was just basically just Walter. And Gary Phillips to some extent was really doing the outside detective fiction and stuff like that, and in thrillers, there really wasn't anybody, and so I mean that really took a lot of wind out of my sails. So when I did the second one, which was was a two-book deal, the second hardcover, A Prayer for Deliverance, that really, I mean, I was really kind of ambivalent. I was torn, I mean, I really didn't, I was excited. And then, that, then fate, the day that came out was the second Gulf War started, and we had our launch in DC, at this big club, down near the Marine Barracks on 8th Street, the night that George W. Bush, announced the second war. So all the Marines, they were clearing. I mean, it was surreal. So I really, I wondered to myself, what is going on here? I mean, should I stop? And to this day, I mean, it's really affected me. I don't know. Subconsciously, it's affected me. Consciously, I don't know. I mean, I do have kind of, it can either defeat you, or it can push you. It can kick you in the rump. For me, it's been neither. It's kind of like, something that kind of sits there behind you and haunts you. Um, so it's always there. So it's neither bad nor good. So, but it's always there. So it's something that I think about a lot. But I do use it as energy, whether it's negative energy or positive energy. It depends on the situation. Sometimes it's positive energy and it really motivates me. Sometimes it's negative energy and it kind of stretches things out. Um, and I sit there and wonder, had I not let that affect me, would I be bigger than I am now? Would
Mhm.
I be, would I have eclipsed some of the people who are my contemporaries? Would I have done this? Would I have done that? So it depends. I'm a human being. And, I have to be honest with myself about that. I mean, I think certain people aren't honest with themselves, but I'm a human being and I try to be honest with myself. And human beings have positive and negative moments. You have very dark moments, you have very light moments. And I think what I like to think of myself as a human, and I'm honest with myself, I have dark moments, I have light moments. And I think that is what I pride myself on. And I think that's part of noir. I mean, noir is not total bleakness, but it is an admission that there are extreme depths and dark moments, but then there are moments when you can kind of claw your way out. It's not going to be all sunshine and lollipops, but at least there's going to be some kind of equilibrium when you do claw your way out.
Yeah, no, and it's amazing. It's amazing what you've done and what you've accomplished, even if that is somewhere that energy is hanging around you. So who knows? There's always tomorrow. And seriously, what you've created since then. But before we move on to the other books, I want you to tell us about Special Agent Angela Bivens, who is the protagonist in both of these first books. Who is she? Where did she come from? And where did she end up going?
Well, it's interesting. She came from my desire to show a young, strong black female protagonist. Um, a lot of the stuff came from my aunt actually introduced me to Thomas Harris, who created Silence of the Lambs, which is an interesting kind of a thing because the guy he's he's this little kind of really fun, wonderful, pudgy guy, and you wonder where these ideas come from. Because he creates Hannibal Lecter, but he also creates Clarice Starling. Now, she was not my Clarice Starling photocopy. I mean, I just want to put that on the record now because she's not. And if you read the books, you'll see that. But at the same time, this is around the time the book industry was starting to become so corporatized and consumed by the entertainment industry that, that's what, they mold into because this is what this is, because when you pitch this stuff, that is what you pitch it as. Well, she's a Black Clarice Starling because you pitch it as that doesn't mean that's what it is. So, and I think people in the industry understand that, and writers understand that. So when you say she's a Black Clarice Starling, that's how you pitch it. But in the art form itself, and when you write it, that's not what it is. So, but that's what that's what you want to talk about it. That's how it was formed. But she is a different kind of person with a different kind of antagonist and a lot of different things happening to her and a different mold, and narrative and kind of a different background that she's springing from. She was my first protagonist, so what I wanted to do, when I jumped forward 20 years to Dickie Cornish, to this last book in this series, StreetWhys, I actually wanted to bookend her, not just to show, off my, artistic journey, but just to show how, human beings, she's back in this, and I have rights to the character, obviously, but to show how people change. 20 years later, she's no longer young and innocent and a neophyte and everything. Now she's almost an antagonist because people do change. And this city of DC and noir itself does change people. Power changes people. So now she's 20 years older and an antagonist in a book with my new protagonist. So, people don't always stay heroes. People don't always stay on the straight and narrow. People don't, power changes people. This city of DC changes people. And so I wanted to show that those bookends where I start with her, and now here she is 20 years later, and she's a totally different person. And a lot of people have been following me since Sympathy for the Devil and A Prayer for Deliverance. I mean, a lot of people got really mad about that. But as I say, look, people change. I've changed. I mean, this is to show that too. I wasn't the same person I was 20 years ago. Are you? I mean, and some people get better, but a lot of people get worse.
Yeah.
I know people who were absolute horrors in high school or college, and they're wonderful people now. I know people who were wonderful people in high school and college and are absolute scumbags now. I mean, and so, I mean, that is, and that fits into the art form of noir also.
Yeah.
I don't think that's an issue. There are characters in noir who are cops, who are robbers, who are detectives, who are gunsels, who are femme fatales. There are femme fatales who were nuns in high schools and are hookers in noir stories. You know, they, I mean, there are people. That's a trope that's gone back to Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and Chester Himes. But it was interesting to me, and it's something I felt I had to do to make things interesting. Trust me, I didn't. It was a heavy decision for me because I liked her. She was my first protagonist. I didn't. I mean, what else was I going to? The worst thing I could have done was kill her off.
Yeah.
And I thought about that in these Dickie Cornish books, but I said, why would I do that? I'll make it interesting
I
and
love that.
turn her into an antagonist.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that. So you switched to a different series in October of 2022 or 2020. You published Scavenger, a Mystery, and I'll just read a little bit about that. It's a lively but desperate world of DC, where a lot of your books are all based here because you grew up here, and right, and I live here now, and this is where we met. So we have an affection for this town. In DC's underbelly, a black homeless man must quickly learn the ropes of being a detective after a wealthy ex-government official sets him up to take the fall for a brutal crime he didn't commit. I love that story, and I want you to tell us all about Dickie Cornish because in 2022 you published Standalone, and then this year you published Streetwhys. So we're watching the evolution of this character. So two questions. Tell us about Dickie, and also tell us about, even deeper, the question would be, what goes on in a writer's mind? So you've got these characters, they're very alive to you. They're, like you and I are talking. It's there, and there's a picture of him on your website. I love that. So they're real. They're very real, and they're going through the human evolution, like you said, sometimes to the better, sometimes for the worst. So tell us first tell us about Dickie, and then tell us about what goes on in your mind.
Well, I had been toying with creating a really hard-boiled noir series for a while, and just to give context, because I have to give the context here. There was a time where the subgenre in mystery and crime fiction was really kind of bottoming out. You had the suspense thrillers, you had the cozies. Then there came the rise of the kind of domestic suspense, which was really aimed really hard for a female audience, more so than the cozies because they were very very hard edged. Um, as female readers got more sophisticated and wanted harder stuff with a kind of a Hitchcockian sexual edge to it, more amateur sleuth, not female cops, not kind of hardcore, um, um, Olivia Benson types, or anything like that. and the hard-boiled stuff kind of fell back. Some of it, old school probably was a little too was sexist, maybe not Hammett and Chandler, but certainly Mickey Spillane and stuff like that. And then the neo noir, it was a little too gritty from the 70s and early 80s. But there was a resurgence in the 2000s with the website Thuglit, which was developed by Todd Robinson. And he brought along a lot of people, including Sean Cosby, S.A. Cosby, who is really setting the world on fire right now. But some people like Gar Anthony Haywood and Gary Phillips, and then my mentor, George Pelecanos, who really just retooled the DC novel from the old crime novel paradigm, which was the Robert Ludlum political thriller, which was the thick, hardcover of the 70s about killing the president, which was really, and really retooled it to the old school about the streets kind of a hardcore crime novel. I really talked to him about what could we do about that, The problem was by the time I was rethinking this aspect, a lot of Washington had been gentrified, So, it's a little easy when it's Chicago or it's Brooklyn or it's the mean streets, it's New Orleans or it's Miami. There's certain, but with Washington, with him, things had just it changed. So I said to him, I said, well, how much lower could we go here? And I said, we're gonna have to think of maybe a homeless guy, and I said, yeah, I mean, a homeless guy. But we had to make him interesting. And a lot of homeless people or unhoused, they do have a story. People weren't born that way. I mean, there was a guy who went to law school at Harvard with the guy who's now the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and he was homeless. I mean, if all these people have stories, they were somebody once. I said, well, I'll make him somebody once. And he was turned out by somebody in school, and he became an addict and this and that, and a drunk and this. And in order to make it really interesting in terms of the narrative, I wrote the whole book Scavenger in second person, because if you aren't crazy initially on the street will make you crazy. The street will make you hear voices. And that voice of the narrative is really his father, who would really abuse him. So you have the narrative now written in second person. And I'll tell you, writing a whole novel in second person where it's not third person, he walked through the door, or first person, I walked through the door, but second person, you walk through the door. That's tough. Okay. So you have definitely a not very cool narrator there. Okay. So it's all part of this formula to get you into that world. And so I pull you into that in Scavenger, and he is a scavenger. I mean, he has certain skills that these people that pull him off the street for whatever reason, and you have to read the book to find out what these specific reasons are. That's part of the mystery. Has. So in the second book, you see him get help for these problems. So he loses some of these skills, these street skills that he's sought out for, but he develops new ones, and you see the second person narrative drop to a more specific and more detective trope first person narrative. So it's all part of the evolution. So you see the character grow and change, because I don't want him to be the same person. I don't want it to be the same book. So and that's how life is. Obviously this isn't real life, but he is sick, he is crazy, he is drunk, he is on smoking K2. He's drinking. He's on Xanax and stuff like that in the first book. He's hallucinating. By the second book, the second person narrative is dropped in parts and then gone altogether to a first person narrative because he's thinking clearly. He's gone to the VA now and getting meds. He now understands things. He's training now as a PI. So now he's dropped some of the street skills that he had before, but now he has more PI skills. And he can now, some of those skills maybe he has to go back to survive, but now he has new ones to cope. So by the third book, he's a lot more professional. And he does have to drop back to some of these other skills that he's maybe, needs in the first two books. So, but this is how life works. There's some, you learn things, and maybe you have to drop back to some things that you have to drop, you thought you didn't need before. And that's what that's the kind of stuff that I like, that I enjoy, I like to play with. But people change. Evolution isn't necessarily getting better. Evolution is changing to adapt to your environment. It seems to be like you're getting better, but what it really means is that you're adapting so that you don't get wiped out. That's what evolution means. That's what Darwin says it means. It doesn't mean you get better or you get smarter. I mean, sometimes that's what it means, but it means you adapt and you change so you don't get wiped out. So
So
you
you don't
can
get
keep
dead.
going, and that's what's going on with him. Now he is getting smarter, but the type of people he's hanging out with, type of people he's working for or dealing with on an everyday basis, I mean, they're criminals. I mean, and there's shortcuts. I mean, his PI license isn't exactly kosher. His gun license isn't exactly kosher, but he adapts to that, and those shortcuts become legal, and it's a process.
So, all right,
So
this is amazing. All right, so because we only have a certain amount of time, and I want to get to all our questions. So, all right,
right.
this is fascinating because I want to know how your brain works because you're kind of living these parallel universes here on Earth, right? You're putting 2 feet, one foot in front of the other. You get up, you go to work, you have breakfast, da da da. But then
Yeah.
you live in this alternative universe. So, so we met at Elaine's Literary Salon where Jeffrey James Higgins interviewed you. And then, so we had the privilege of meeting each other there. And he always asked the question, where does story come from? So I want you to answer that question today. And also, what's it like to live in your head?
Well, I think you just got an example there. It There are pieces that just are just there. And I can't really answer that question. They're just in there.
Mhm.
I observe things, some things I mimic, and then I adapt. Some things, it's a hard question to answer. I mean, all I can say is there's some things I'll see. I'll see a bug crawling on the ground, and I'll say, okay, that makes an interesting story. And then the next day, I'll see a bug crawling on the ground, and I'll step on it. And then the next day, I'll see a bug crawling on the ground. I'll pick it up and I'll put it on the wall. I mean, it just depends. Um, and then the next day, I'll think about stepping on the bug, and that'll be a story.
Mhm.
Um, I've always been able to compartmentalize that. I can come up with a very realistic, grounded kind of a story, or I can think in terms of as a story for uh, Captain America,
Yeah, I want you to
or
talk about that.
for
So,
Black Panther,
yeah, which is
or
cool.
for
And how did you get there? How did you get from
yeah.
these hardcore streetwise, detectives and analysts to working with Marvel? Because you did your most recent Marvel work is with Captain America before you did Black Panther, Tales of
Yeah.
Wakanda, which is amazing. So, all right, how did you get from one to the other, and what does it look like to work for Marvel?
Well, that actually is interesting. I mean, when I was doing pulp and I was advising on storylines with some graphic novel companies. I mean, that was a little more freewheeling. With Marvel, though, it's very formulaic, which is good and bad. You have to really meet the canon, as they say, and the guidelines and the Bible, as they say. And I don't like doing that, as you can probably imagine. That's the only payoff is that you can hang your hat and say, well, I work for Marvel, but it is a grind for me to have to because I like to be a square peg in the round hole, but they will hammer those hard edges off of you. But the payoff is to look back and say you did it, and and also say that they saw something in you that to invite you to do it in the first place.
Yeah.
When you turn around and look back on what you've accomplished, I think that is the payoff. I think that it is also an affirmation that I do have a diversity of ideas and stories in me where I can come up with these kinds of things. I mean, I don't have the head for super fantasy and alternative stuff and alternative sci-fi and stuff like that. I think that my stories have always been they do kind of tend towards the crime and mystery and noir, but I can bend them. I think I have the talent to bend them enough to fit. If they are a comic book close quote canon, I can do that. But I mean, I do have that bend. But see, that's the thing. I think these people recognize that I bring that to the stories. So they're not going to ask me to come up with something that's really hardcore sci-fi or really hardcore fantasy. They know that. They know that I'm not going to come up with something about goblins and elves and something like that. Unless it's about elves that want to do a drive-by. you know, but but they recognize that I'll bring that element. The graphic novels and with Marvel and stuff, the analogy I can give you is that it is in the Departed when Jack Nicholson was talking to Leonardo DiCaprio, and he was talking about John Lennon, and he said, John Lennon said, look, if you give me a tuba, I'll get a tune out of it for you. It's like, I can do that for you. That's the analogy I can give you.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, you make it work. You make it happen. It's perfect.
Yeah, I'll make it work.
All right. So two last questions for episode 1, which is where I get to talk to you before we launch into your show where you're going to be interviewing people. So the question is, what's next? Do you have another series? And then I want to talk about the show.
Yeah. I'm working on a new manuscript featuring Dickie Cornish. Untitled, but I think it's tentatively going to be called Parasite Class, which is actually a term that Elon Musk came up with, and about with a meme that he actually has, but so he has no copyright right to it. To a meme. I'm also working on a historical novel about the burning of Washington in 1814.
Oh, nice.
It's a new kind of thing for me, so that's going to be interesting. I'm actually doing research on it now, and some people at the Navy Museum down in the Navy Yard are helping me with that. So that's enough to keep me occupied right there.
It sounds like a good thing, especially for your wife, to be occupied, who we will bring on to the show because she's amazing. I had the opportunity to meet her a few times. She's wonderful. Your whole family is. All right. So let's talk about Chris Chambers Noir, the show, the podcast and video show.
Right.
So tell us what we have planned. Tell us what you have planned.
Piggybacking on the, social and everything from the social and literary and political issues about those, working on those 2 books. Elon's meme and working on that, the background of that book, the second book, historically what happened there. A lot of people don't realize that, we weren't as big and bad as we thought we were. Somebody walked up here and burned the city down right from under our noses.
Yep.
And
And yeah, and that famous story about the picture of George Washington, Dolly Madison taken out of the White House.
oh yeah,
I've
and
seen that. That's great stuff.
ran everybody off of at Bladensburg too. But then there was heroism 30 miles up the Baltimore Washington Parkway. So, I mean, there's that. There's the neighborhoods that I write about in my novels. There's a lot of change going on there. There's a lot of change in the present book I'm writing now about the stadium. We'll see whether the Commanders actually come back here or not. We'll
Or
talk
they
about
become
that.
the Redskins again. So we're gonna
Yeah,
bring
or
on
whether they become
guests.
the Redskins
Yeah.
again.
Crazy times here in
There's
Washington,
that
July
too.
2025. Yeah. So we're going to bring on guests and you're going to talk about all of this. And that's what the show is
Yeah,
going to be. It's going to be an evolution, I think. I hope that's what
yeah,
I'm looking forward to as the producer, so that we can turn the tables and the writer can ask the questions of different guests. So I'm
oh
really
yeah,
excited, bringing in the noir and what that means.
yeah. I
Like,
mean, that's the beautiful thing is, and other noir writers. The beautiful thing about them is that because we look at the bleaker side, they aren't necessarily bleaker people. I mean, they have a very good eye for things. They're not pie in the sky, or they're not bleak people. I mean, they have a very good eye for a lot of different things, and that's why they're very interesting as guests because they'll give very very cool, thoughtful answers to things. And that's why it's I'm looking forward to this.
oh, me too. That's so cool. Yeah. And you never know who you're going to meet, right? And who's going to share with
Yeah,
you some, or what's going on in someone's head and heart.
yeah. That's
I-
the great thing. Yeah.
yeah.
But not too crazy though. That's
We'll stay
I
on
I
this
don't know
side
if
of
I want
it.
to get that many poets on because that something weird might actually spring out of somebody's forehead right in
Right.
front
We'll
of
keep
you.
it under control. We'll just stay on this side of it.
Yes.
All right. Christopher Chambers, thank you so much. Our audience, thank you for listening to episode 1. Chris Chambers Noir is our new show on Incandescent Radio and Incandescent TV. And please check out chrischambersnoir.com, his new website that we had the privilege of creating here at Incandescent, where it has all of his books. You can read about them, you can read about his background, and you can click to buy the books, which are definitely worth the purchase. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
All right. We'll look forward to seeing you
Thank
all
you.
in episode 2. My pleasure. All right. We'll see you soon. I'm Hope Katz Gibbs, proud to be here.